Looking at the Miami Marlins farm system, you have a lot of pitching prospects with high upside, not a lot of position players who can actually hit the ball. Let's talk about it.
You are Locked On MLB Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on in to Locked On MLB Prospects, your home for all things minor league baseball. I'm your host, Lindsay Crosby, award-winning baseball writer and podcaster, and thank you for making this your first listen every single day. We're proudly part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day, and today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers, join today, and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Okay, so looking at the Miami Marlins, this is a really interesting farm system because this is one of the teams that the farm system is heavily weighted in one direction, right? Off the top of my head, just really easily to put together, Miami Marlins, Atlanta Braves, Oakland A's are all teams that feel like they have a depth in pitching and some guys with some high upside, but your weakness is just on your position player side, and specifically the ability to make an impact from an offensive perspective with those bats. So, quick reminder, we're not going to get to every top prospect or every notable prospect in this system in the show. If there's somebody you want to hear about that we don't get a chance to talk about, or you're just someone you want more info on, let me know. We'll stick it in that Monday mailbag. I'm on Twitter at Crosby Baseball. Show's on Twitter at Locked On Farm. We've got email, a Discord, all of that stuff. It's in the episode description. It's in the show notes. Okay, the top prospects in this system. It is very easy to see that they are pitching prospects, both guys that were taken last year, and right-hand pitcher Noble Meyer and left-hand pitcher Thomas White. And you don't actually have a lot of stuff to go off of with these guys. Noble Meyer was the 10th overall pick in the draft. He threw 11 innings. Thomas White was the 35th overall player taken in the draft and threw less than 5 innings. So the actual performance numbers from them, again, not really a lot to talk about. Noble Meyer, 11 innings, 11 hits, 5 runs, 7 walks to 15 strikeouts. Weird stat line, statistically not really significant as far as not predictive of anything. There's no point in talking about the ratios and all that kind of stuff. Thomas White, even a weirder stat line. 4 to third innings, 3 hits, 7 runs, but 3 of them were earned. Because again, this is the minors, the low level of the minors, and weird things happen, right? 6 walks to 7 strikeouts. So really what we're doing when we talk about Noble Meyer and Thomas White is we're really looking at the MLB draft profiles of these guys and seeing, is there anything significant that stood out to us from their short debuts that was different from what we're used to seeing or what we expected to see based on the scouting reports. And then obviously we're projecting off of that. So Noble Meyer, we saw what we expected to see, right? So it's a fastball, really unique fastball, sits 95, has some decent induced vertical break, but also has 1.5 feet of horizontal run. A unique profile. It feels like he gets more induced vertical break than a typical two-seamer does or a sinker does, but either way, interesting kind of pitch there. I think it's because of the spin. The slider, mid-80s, gets like 1 foot of horizontal movement. It's also a super high spin pitch. So I think that's why that fastball ends up being a little bit unique. Makes sense he'd go at kind of number 10 overall because, again, the pitch characteristics of that fastball are incredibly unique. And we've talked about this before, but one of the goals as a pitcher is for your pitches to move differently from how the hitter expects, right? That is the goal towards getting swing and miss and inducing weak contact, is you want your pitches to move differently from how the hitter's muscle memory and quick reaction has them thinking it's going to. That is the trick to avoid barrels. That is the trick to keep the ball in the park, keep the ball on the ground. So that fastball having really good horizontal movement and more vertical movement than expected is a good pitch. The slider, tons of spin. It's got some good velocity on it, mid-80s there. And then he's got a changeup that I think could be really good. And I think this is the right organization to maximize the ceiling of Noble Meyer, because this organization, probably more so than any others, feels like it's really good at developing changeups on some of their pitchers. You look at somewhere between above average to plus control. He's a really good athlete. It feels like Noble Meyer can be a future frontline starter for the Marlins. I'm not going to call him number one. We're very reluctant to call guys number ones. But I think this early in his career, you can see the potential to be a number two, right? Thomas White, again, another interesting profile. The fastball also sits in the mid-90s. He's got some good run to it. Not nearly as much as Noble Meyer, but for a lefty, it's pretty good. His primary breaking ball, instead of a slider, it's a big high 70s curveball, right? Now, to go along with that, he's also got what I feel like is an above average changeup. And there you got that. The curveball, a little bit of a baby sweeper in there or baby slider in there. You've got a couple different options here. But again, the right organization to make this work. And I say the right organization to make this work because you're very heavily slanted toward pitching in this organization. If you go and you look in Fangraphs and you look at their projected depth chart, of the 13 players that are projected to be either starting position players or on the bench at the major league level this year, exactly 2 of them were drafted or signed by the Marlins, right? You've got catcher Nick Fortes, projected to bat 9th, was a 4th rounder in 2018, and you've got outfielder Peyton Burdick on your bench, who was a 3rd rounder in 2019. Everybody else, including the top 6 in your lineup, were trade acquisitions. And so it's just, this organization historically has not been very good at drafting position players and getting them to the majors. Whereas your projected rotation here, and according to the Fangraphs, Jesus Luzardo, trade acquisition from Oakland in 2021. The exception there. Outside of that, Yuri Perez, international free agent. Braxton Garrett, 2016 first rounder. Edward Cabrera, international free agent. Trevor Rogers, 2017 first rounder. This organization, the strength of the organization is pitching. That's why you saw them make the Pablo Lopez Luis Ariz trade last year, because they built a good pitcher in Pablo Lopez and they said, we need to improve our offense. We're going to use him as a trade piece, knowing that we have other pitchers behind him who can come in and do stuff. So you understand what you do well in this organization, and they stick with it. The issue comes in, and we'll talk about this a little bit later in the third segment. The issue comes in when you have position players who are taken highly in the draft and can't necessarily perform, because that's a place where you would have gotten a pitcher had you not gone for the position player. And so now you have less assets to make those trades with. Because you've had some of those position players who did not hit or have not hit yet, this farm system is weaker than it could be because you're not getting as much development out of these guys, and they're not at the point where either they can contribute at the major league level or they're promising trade chips to go get offense to contribute at the major league level. Maybe Peter Bendix can fix this. The Rays have been really good at developing both pitching and hitting. We'll see what happens with him taking over the organization. And a lot of the hires that he's made so far, from what I remember and understand, have been focused on player development, scouting, things like that. So we'll see if he can get this organization to be a little bit better at getting drafted and free agent additions developed, especially on the position player side, and get them to the majors or get them attractive enough to be used in trades with other organizations. In just a minute, there are still some players you may see contribute in 2024 in some way or another. We'll discuss those guys next, right here on Locked On MLB Prospects. But first, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience These are the things that bring home the winning trophy, but it's also what keeps your vehicle alive and running at peak performance. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for, and with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your vehicle every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. So keep your vehicle running to peak performance at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions do apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Okay, so looking at this Miami Marlins system and trying to figure out who's going to be a contributor at the major league level in 2024, I've got a couple options for position players and then a couple pitchers you may or may not see, depending on recovery from injury, specifically elbow injuries. One of them had Tommy John, one of them had the internal brace. So, outfielder Victor Mesa got 123 games in Double-A last year, and it was a really, I'm not going to say rough year, but it was a really tale of two extremes for his season, right? So, overall for Victor Mesa in 123 games, 242, 308, 412, 18 home runs, 54 extra base hits, 41 walks to 122 strikeouts, and 16 and 19 on stolen bases. Regular listeners, everydayers of the show, know we've talked about the Double-A Southern League and the tacky baseball and what happened with opposing pitchers and getting extra induced vertical break on their pitches and stuff because of this tacky baseball. It didn't really seem to bother Victor Mesa that much, because some of his best offensive months, 3 of his 4 best offensive months, were early in the year. So he had a really good April and a really good September, relatively speaking. He batted .286 in April. He batted .281 in September. Had 6 home runs combined between those 2 months. And so bookended the year like that. His May and June were fine. Batting average was around .250. Like, it's right there with his season average, because he batted .242 for the season. .240 and .246 in May and June. July and August, he really struggled. Batted .189 in July. Batted .226 in August. Now, that being said, his best home run production month was August with 5 home runs. Just a really streaky profile. But again, 3 of the 4 best months offensively for Victor Mesa were with that tacky baseball in the Southern League. Really a confusing profile there. And when you look at the overall numbers, you can see that not everything is maybe necessarily great under the hood for Victor Mesa, right? So contact rate was only 71%, and he chased about a third of the time. So that is an above average amount of chase in the profile. And it's weird because in the second half of the year, again, the stats weren't as good. It was like a .224 batting average in those last 3 months of the year, but his contact rate went up in those months compared to the earlier months. So very much a weird profile. And obviously, it feels like he must have gotten more comfortable and just had some bad luck. We don't have BABIP numbers for Double-A, but it feels like there has to be something else to this because the underlying stuff got better, the overall stats got worse. And when you watch him, the big takeaway, I saw him a few times in Montgomery, the big takeaway is it's a really long swing, and he's got to be quicker into the zone. Like, that's the big thing for him because he's a good athlete. Plus arm, the defense I feel like is somewhere between above average and plus. He played most of the time in center field, like 100 games there, got 12 in right, 7 in left, 4 at DH. I feel like he could stick in center field for most teams. With Jazz in center field, whenever Victor Mesa comes up, unless Jazz is out injured, it feels like Victor Mesa is going to be your right fielder instead. But he's going to have to hit. And so starting this year in AAA and getting good offense is going to be crucial if he wants to be up later in the year. Another guy that has okay offense, but it's empty offense, is Jacob Amaya. 11th rounder in 2017 out of high school. Trade acquisition by Miami here. They got him from the Dodgers in January of 2023, so it's been a year now. In 128 games, all in AAA last year. 252, 345, 407. 15 homers, 43 extra base hits, 70 walks to 106 strikeouts, 6 of 8 on stolen bases. Contact numbers were strong. 82% overall contact, 87% in the zone. He doesn't chase a lot. It's like 21%. And he's more passive and controlled than he is aggressive. It's like a 39% swing. The issue here is the power numbers aren't necessarily great, right? Now, when he gets the right kind of pitch and he can pull it down the line, he can hit for some okay power, but he's more of a defense and batting average guy and on base than he's going to be a power performer. Again, 6 of 8 stolen bases, so even the speed's not necessarily amazing, but he's going to give you strong defense. He's got a plus arm. Spent most of his time at short, cross-trained a little bit at second, so valuable there. But your thing here, again, batting average, hits on base is going to be what Jacob Amaya does. It felt like he should have had a better batting average than 252, given the high contact rates, but just the impact wasn't necessarily there on a lot of that stuff. A guy that I'm interested in, who's been really quiet in the system, I think because he's 26, first baseman Trey Johnston, 2019 17th rounder out of Gonzaga, got 134 games between AA and AAA. 307, 399, 549, 26 home runs, 67 extra base hits, 62 walks to 108 strikeouts, 24 of 26 on stolen bases. He's a left-hand hitter, and the power numbers aren't amazing. They don't jump off the page as far as the exit velocities. They're decidedly average or so, but he makes really good contact. He swings more than half the time, so he's aggressive at that, but 78% overall contact, 85% in the zone. And despite the power only being average, he's able to get it into games. And so he gives you options at first base if you're looking for power. Again, if you go to the Fangraphs thing right now, you've got Avisail Garcia as your DH. You've got Josh Bell, who opted into his contract for 2024 only at first, and Luis Ariz at second. You could always work out something. Garcia's your DH. He also hit 14 home runs last year. He's not really a big power guy. And so I do see a scenario where Johnston gets some run later in the year. He's a perfectly fine defender. He's not amazing. He's not bad. Perfectly fine defender. Him and Bell split time between first base and DH, and he brings a little bit of a power component. Because again, power numbers aren't amazing, but he just gets really good quality contact. Left-hand pitcher Dax Fulton, right-hand pitcher Max Meyer. Two guys that have been injured with elbow injuries. Meyer, I believe, had the full Tommy John. Fulton had the internal brace, the UCL repair. And I've been told Fulton's going to be ready for, the belief is he'll be ready for opening day. I'm a little bit hesitant on that. Second rounder in 2020 out of high school, and struggled a little bit last year in AA before the injury. He had an ERA over 5 in like 33 innings, 19 walks to 39 strikeouts, gave up 4 home runs. Fastball's in the mid-90s. He doesn't do 4 directions, but he covers 3 really well. So he's got the fastball he'll throw up, and then he's got a 2-plane breaking slider that goes to the right. It goes in on a right-handed hitter. And then he's got a changeup with good fade that goes down and away from a right-handed hitter. So it's the same idea as far as covering multiple directions. It all comes out of the same tunnel. It's just 3 pitches instead of 4. But a complete spin monster, just tons of spin. The control's good. Obviously, that takes a while to come back. And I'm hesitant to say that you can have the internal brace in June and be ready to go on opening day, but we'll see what he does. I'm curious to see in spring training what he's able to do and what he looks like. And then I also still don't know, because he got such limited run in AA last year, is he a major league option in 2024? I think maybe in the back half of the schedule. But either way, I'm really curious to see what happens with Dax Fulton and how much he's able to contribute. In just a minute, let's talk about some of these position players in the lower minors, guys you should watch for, and some of the hit tool concerns with some of these guys. We'll do that next, right here on Locked on MLB Prospects. But first, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. happy lead up to the Super Bowl to all who celebrate from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. If you're like me, you really enjoy the Super Bowl for all the extra prop bets. I've talked about this, but like length of the anthem, who's going to score first, all of those extra kind of dumb props, the color of the Gatorade, those are all the really fun ones to me. And so what's great is not only can you bet on Super Bowl 58 and who's going to win, but they've got all those extra bets. How many points are going to get scored? Which players will score a touchdown? Who will score first? What type of score will happen first? All that kind of stuff. So, new customers, you can join today and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. So, visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. And then you can check out the MLB bets because there's not really a lot of love coming to this Marlins team. Luis Ariz and Jazz Chisholm are the only MVP odds guys on the board. Ariz at plus 7,000, Jazz Chisholm at plus 20,000 for MVP. Now, Cy Young, obviously, pitching dominant organization. There are more options here. Jesus Luzardo, plus 3,000. Yuri Perez, plus 4,000. Braxton Garrett, plus 5,000. Edward Cabrera, plus 20,000. 4 guys in the Cy Young odds. Amazing. But Max Meyer, also in here for Rookie of the Year, plus 2,600. We'll see what he looks like coming back from Tommy John. But if you want a chance to bet on the Super Bowl and then get in on all of these odds, FanDuel.com/lockedon. Okay, final segment of Locked On MLB Prospects here, looking at the Miami Marlins and talking about some of the guys in this system and some of the hit tool concerns you've got with some of the position players in the minors. Jacob Berry was your first rounder in 2022 out of LSU. Third baseman, first baseman, and he's in that really weird and bad place of defensively, he's not really getting it done at third base, but from a power perspective, he's also not really getting it done. And so he's a third baseman who has to move to first, who's not hitting for a lot of power. Last year, 107 games between high A and double A. He got to double A after the tacky balls, if I remember right. And he batted .233, .284, .388. 9 home runs, 41 extra base hits, but 25 walks to 96 strikeouts and 10 of 11 on stolen bases. Jacob Berry only made 77% contact, but yet the exit velocities, depending on the two levels, were either just at average or below average. And I don't want to say this is a bad pick or this is a bust. It's only been one full season of his career, but you have a guy in the first round who you took as a third baseman, who you're looking at having to move to first base probably as soon as during this year, and he played 36 of his games at first. So they're aware that he's already having to spend some time at first base because the speed's not great and the defense isn't great. But he's also hitting for plenty of doubles, but not getting home run power. Again, only 9 home runs in 107 games with 32 doubles to go along with that. And so a little bit of concerns there. You double down on that same profile, though, by taking Kemp Alderman in the second round out of Ole Miss last year. 4 games in A-ball for him, 205, 286, 316, 1 homer and 10 extra base hits, 7 walks to 39 strikeouts, and he went 4 for 4 on stolen bases. He's listed as a corner outfielder. The arm is above average, but because of the speed, it feels like he's going to have to end up moving to first base. And you have a guy who had a 70% contact rate in college, 80% in the zone, and in his 34-game major league sample, or professional baseball sample, he had a 63% overall contact and 69% in the zone. Now, some of that may have been the sample size. I don't know exactly when 90th percentile exit velo, how many batted ball events you need for that to stabilize. That's probably should have done that homework before I got on this show. But I'm going to chalk that up right now to sample size issues. And we're more confident in his power. I've seen 110 for 90th percentile exit velos with metal. It's going to come back a little bit with wood, but it's still going to end up being above average or plus power. The question's going to be, will he make enough contact? And then, can he stay as an outfielder, or are you going to have to move him to first base? And if you do that, now you've got 2 guys in Berry and Alderman who are confined to first base to go along with Trey Johnston. And in just a minute, I'm going to talk about Brock Vandenberg, and he's another guy who's going to be a first base option, and you drafted him this year, so he might be a first base to DH. It's odd choices for prospects because most of them have contact concerns, but some of them also aren't giving you the defense that you're looking for. Just an odd job with scouting. Shortstop, Yiddi Cappe. Really interesting guy here because the defense isn't necessarily great in the middle infield, to the point where I wonder, and I think Baseball America had this too, does he have to move to the outfield? So 123 games in high A, 220, 250, 308. 5 homers, 33 extra base hits for Yiddi Cappe, 18 walks to 102 strikeouts, 18 to 27 on stolen bases. The issue here, the power hasn't fully come in yet. It's projectable. I think he can get to decent power, but he's not quite there. He's listed at 6'3", 175. Feels like there's some weight you can add to that frame. I could see him at eventually ending up at 200 pounds or something like that. But it's a very aggressive profile. 38% chase, more than 50% swing. So he's swinging over half the time at the pitches that come in, but the contact's only like 76%. You're in a situation where defensively, he's not really contributing yet. The power isn't there yet, but the contact is only okay. And so it's just another kind of example for me of maybe some of the choices of players haven't necessarily been the best in international free agency in the draft when it comes to position player side. And hopefully Peter Bendix, coming from the Rays, can help with that. A couple more minor leaguers I want to get to in the lower minors real quick. Carson Milbrandt, 3rd rounder out of high school in 2022. Really interesting pitcher. Didn't have great results in single A and high A. It's 23 starts, ERA of 5 in 95 and a third innings, 93 strikeouts to 50 walks. And the stuff is interesting here. He throws a 4-pitch mix, mid-90s fastball, a curveball, a slider, a change. The command and the control just isn't necessarily there. And part of the issue is he throws way too many fastballs compared to everything else. It's like a 70% fastball usage. So definitely needs to figure out the belief and the trust in the secondaries, and then hopefully can dial into location a little bit better where he's not being so streaky with the command and the control. Because again, the changeups in the high 80s, I think this organization can develop good changeups, curveball, slider, fastball. The tools are there. You just have to get them in the zone reliably, and you have to use the other pitches more. And so we'll see what Carson Milbrandt does this year. And then I mentioned Brock Vandenberg, 3rd rounder in 2023 out of college, 34 games in A-ball after the draft, 236, 386, 291. 4 extra base hits, got 1 homer, 22 walks to 37 strikeouts, 3 of 4 on stolen bases. Defensively, you drafted a first baseman. He is a first baseman. He had 26 games at first, 8 at DH. So you may have to move him to DH because the defense is only okay, although it's a small sample size. It takes a long time to scout and get a good, accurate feel for a guy's defense. I don't think I have that yet with Vandenberg. Contact rate, just over 70%. Power was only okay. Now, he doesn't chase a ton. It's 17% chase. But it's an odd decision to take him in the 3rd round when you've got Alderman around ahead of him, who's probably going to have to move to first, and you've got Jacob Berry from the 1st round last year, who's probably going to have to move to first base. Just a really interesting and confusing maybe choice of a player to take when feels like the strength of this system would have just been grab another pitcher and develop him into either a trade chip or a major league piece. Real quick, watch for catcher Will Banfield, 2nd rounder out of high school in 2018. Great defender. 28% caught stealing last year, had an absolute cannon. But offensively, some stuff kind of clicked last year in Double-A. 258 average, 472 slugging, hit 23 extra base hits. He has some hit tool questions still. It's like a 70% contact. He chases almost 40% of the time. He swings over 50% of the time. But the point is, he took a step forward. Organization has not had a lot of success at getting catchers ever since JT Realmuto. Hopefully, Banfield going forward could be the guy as soon as 2025. And then our dart throw here, Anthony Maldonado, 11th rounder in 2019 out of Bethune-Cookman. Very good reliever, 37 games in AAA, ERA of a 1.62 in 50 innings, 14 strikeouts per 9 to under 4 walks per 9, only 5 home runs allowed all year. Has a two-seam fastball in low to mid-90s, has a cutter in the upper 80s and a slider in the low 80s. And what's great is he mixes all three of those evenly. Like, it's 30-something% usage of all three. So I think the two-seamer is probably the worst of the three, but either way, he mixes them really well. Again, this organization, good at pitching, good at getting pitchers to be better than what they are. I feel like you'll see him, very easily see him this year, and I think he could get up into a medium leverage or so role, and if there's a little bit of improvement on the velocity or the shape of the two-seamer, you may have a guy that could get into a medium to high leverage role, so watch for him. Fantastic week this week. One more of these coming. We got the Atlanta Braves coming. Stay tuned for that. In the meantime, questions for the mailbag. I'm on Twitter at Crosby Baseball. Show's on Twitter at Locked On Farm. Everything else in the episode description, in the show notes, in that link tree. Until next time, remember, it's always a great time to pay a minor leaguer.